quite challenging as well, and a comment there around, the policy and practice of, IEMA, and I'd like to bring to the stage the head of policy and practice for IEMA.
It's very mischievous. Thank you. Yeah, good to be here today. I would just actually like to say that IEMA has really enjoyed working with CIEEM and CIRIA on the guidance for Biodiversity Net Gain. So I enjoyed working with Claire and the team on that. And we worked for, I think, probably 2 years, probably. Yeah, 2 years. Okay, thank you. Sorry. I'm going to run through this fairly quickly and fairly pacey, but just to say that we started working on this back in 2013, as Claire said, when the former coalition government was consulting on Biodiversity Net Gain. Many of our members at that time were particularly interested in how this worked. The Lawton report was still fairly new and in people's minds, and there was a lot of concern about fragmentation and ecological loss. There was also other things going on, like carbon neutrality and these kind of things. And in both of these cases, Biodiversity Net Gain and carbon neutrality, we at IEMA were really keen on saying you've got to avoid the jump to an offset solution. So license to trash was a phrase that Claire used, and we were very much keen on that whole area of following a hierarchy. You get these hierarchies: mitigation hierarchy, waste hierarchy. Hierarchies are pretty useful as a sustainability tool in this space of communicating what we're trying to achieve and get across to the public. So we're absolutely at one on the whole mitigation hierarchy. So I'm going to talk about what might be the next big thing, I suppose, after Biodiversity Net Gain, and we shall see. But how does Biodiversity Net Gain link across to environmental net gain? This map is, I think, and people have heard me recently in the last few weeks, I've used this relentlessly, this map. Here we are looking at a 4°C world, which is broadly what we're on course for, even if we meet certain reduction targets, or maybe we might be on course for a 3° world if we fully, all of the countries that signed up to the Paris Accord meet their targets. So the green areas are the future areas expected, this comes from the World Bank, by the way. The green areas are expected to be where your bread baskets are, where you're going to be growing food. Well, that's great, but this is on an interesting projection of the world. It's on a Mercator projection. Greenland doesn't actually happen to be that large. These green areas of future breadbasket are not that large. And Richard talked about the whole issue of biocrops earlier and negative emission technologies and putting land over to grow energy crops, which will have to be used to draw down carbon, produce low carbon electricity and energy sources, and then sequestrate that carbon afterwards. Biological, ecological, carbon capture and storage, negative emission technologies. This is the idea in the future. Well, we aren't going to have the land necessarily for that, are we? And we've got this pressure on biodiversity that we know about. So these are the two big landmark reports. And as professionals, we always draw on the science, and we go back to our science base. And we know that the 1.5° report, the special report in October last year from the IPCC, combined with the more recent IPBES report, and some great quotes from Robert Watson in the media recently around this, these two have really, in our community, escalated attention, but also at the public at large. The school strikes, Fridays for the Future, Extinction Rebellion are all drawing on this, sometimes accurately. Here we have our perception of sustainability, and we draw very much from work from Kate Rayworth, who herself draws from Rockstrom and other academic work. And we're really interested in how environmental net gain ties in with sustainability. Can you get environmental net gain? Does that equal sustainability? Not necessarily. It's about this just, safe space for humanity between the environmental limits and the social foundation. So the interesting thing about moving from biodiversity into environmental net gain for us is very much, how does this work in a sustainability context? And net gain, biodiversity net gain, environmental net gain, implicit is the trade-off here. And this is what we're trying to minimize. We're trying to reduce the trade-off and get to resolving. I don't know if any of you are old enough to recall John Gummer when he was a minister and when the environment programs came through from the government, but they were looking then at a definition of sustainability and a sustainable development that used the phrase not balance environment, society and economy, but resolve across those three pillars. And we're looking at resolution here, not trade-offs, as far as we can get to. That's the ambition. These are the principles that we put into the Biodiversity Net Gain principles that we drafted with Chartered Institute of Ecology, myself and Sally Haynes there and others just before we did the guidance recently. And these 10 principles are not just about biodiversity. They're very much tying into optimized sustainability, principle 9, to be transparent, 10, and also at 3, to be inclusive and equitable. We realize the importance of the sustainability connection in the Biodiversity Net Gain work. So moving into environmental net gain and where Defra is going with this, well, this is where we are. 25-year plan to improve the environment, underpinned by a natural capital approach. So this is hinging around understanding of natural capital, stocks, ecosystem services and flows. I've stolen this from Nick White at Natural England. He very kindly lent it to me, and I've used it relentlessly ever since. I like his concept of the Russian dolls, where at one side here you have biodiversity, and a broader concept than biodiversity is natural capital net gain, where you're bringing in clean air, clean and plentiful water, reduced risk of harm from environmental hazards, flooding and drought. All of the concepts starting to come in from the Environment White Paper. And then beyond natural capital, you move into an environmental gain space, where you're bringing in concepts like minimizing waste, exposure to chemicals, enhancing biodiversity. The 10 points on this graphic are directly from the Environment White Paper, the 10 principles from that work, from the 25-year plan. So as we carry through from biodiversity into natural capital into environmental net gain, we're looking very much at this situation of how does this work in the government's context of the development context, looking at the new developments coming through, and it's a concept that's focusing around a place and an area-based approach. The issue is there that we don't want to forget the global. So when we look at environmental net gain in a place and area-based approach, we need to have that tie into the global context as well. And this then carries through assets and stocks, risks and tipping points. It's basically a biodiversity plus approach. And to speed through to some other work that we've been involved with the Natural Capital Coalition and Natural Capital Protocol, this graphic from Pavan Sugdev is really rather good in terms of how all of the SDGs themselves can hinge up from a platform of natural environment. So you've got the 4 natural environment related SDGs at the base here: life on land, life below water, clean water, and climate action. And from this biosphere related SDG framing going up into society and economy. Quite a lot of concentric circles in this particular presentation that I'm giving today. In a UK context, we've got some interesting schemes that have been around for a little while now and which work quite nicely in relation to environmental net gain. The thing with many of these is that they will focus on a single ecosystem service, perhaps. In this case, forestry and peatland codes, Woodland Carbon Code and the Peatland Code, both developed around a core focus of carbon sequestration and trading carbon sequestration. And on top of that, delivering multiple environmental gain benefits. But one economic aspect driving the wider scheme. And this is good, contentious sometimes, in terms of environmental trading, but it's a reality of the space that many of us as professionals are working in, and we're trying to get good outcomes with these particular schemes. There is a really interesting focus here. This is the Woodland Carbon Code success mapped across the UK. It's picking up pretty well. Carbon credits achieved through the Woodland Carbon Code can be reported in a company's annual GHG report. They do make a legitimate contribution. Defra guidance points to that. We help them do that. The point about this is an interesting one in terms of, do these schemes and government schemes sit in isolation, or can you merge them together? So Biodiversity Net Gain, all the work that we enjoyed doing with Claire and colleagues, can you imagine a project where you would create a new woodland, you would do it at a scale where you could attract funding from both the Biodiversity Net Gain side and from the Woodland Carbon side and deliver multiple benefits? And this is a bit of a space where I haven't yet seen that project out there, but I think that's going to come through increasingly as an area. And to conclude, I think it's really important with environmental net gain to think about what the outcome focus is. We've got 11 years, according to the 1.5 degree report, to really bend that curve on carbon emissions. We've got a similar kind of timescale urgency challenge around biodiversity. There's a huge amount of work through the Transition Alliance, Rapid Transition Alliance, the work by the Aldersgate Group on accelerating innovation towards net zero, and of course the Committee on Climate Change's recent work as well. A range of work here that we can draw on as examples about the positivity around how we can achieve transition. So I think environmental net gain needs to be more than just the point-in-time assessment of a single development. It's more about that challenge of how it links to broader sustainability and this transition that we're on. So, thank you. That's it.
Nick, thank you very much indeed. And a good segue into the Parliamentary Under Secretary of State for Defra, Dr. Therese Coffey.